The first community project I got involved with was Lilac in Leeds. Anybody heard of Lilac? Great. It's a few people. It's like an eco home scheme for about 20 people, built with straw bales, and it was just basically a group of people who came together who just had this idea of creating a vibrant, living, affordable community. So they found a bit of land in Leeds. It was on the outskirts, not very valuable. This is about the time of just after the first crash in 2008-9. So the land wasn't very valuable. So it was a fairly council to actually deal with them. But there's obviously a certain amount of risk from the point of view of the council of, well, what could possibly go wrong here? Who are these people? You know, if they try and do this and it all goes horribly wrong, you know, is that's going to be egg on our faces? And there's a reputational issue there. So the first barrier that we had to overcome, and the reason I got involved, was to basically give that credible idea that somebody who's got a track record of building and developing. I come from the housing association background. I've built lots of stuff in Leeds in my housing association days, and by that point I was a housing consultant. So that was a tick box to give them an idea that we were credible, and that was a successful project. And we could build off that to go on to the next project that we worked on in Leeds, which was Chapeltown Co-housing, Chaco, which we only just finished this year. And a similar kind of scheme with similar kind of ideals on council land, but it was a much more ambitious project to start with. It was much more, about 3 or 4 times the scale. We wanted to do a couple hundred homes, we wanted to do startups, we wanted to do self-build, all sorts of different things. And the council were, well, they were okay with the idea of working with the group because we had the track record of Lilac, but they really didn't think we could do all of that kind of stuff, so they pared it down and said, wouldn't you like to just do this corner of the site? And in the end, to actually demonstrate credibility, what we had to do was partner up with a bigger organisation, a housing association, to work as an equal partner. They didn't do everything for us, we worked as parallel partners, but that gave us again the credibility and additionally brought in capital to make it happen. And that's again a really interesting, successful project. But again, we had to work really hard to get the people on the outside on the inside to let us into the tent. So I think there's a few tools that I can kind of take from some of those experiences that we've had. And Phil and I have talked about this idea of kind of amicable activism and how a community can be a little bit of a loud irritant for the big stakeholders, the developers, the landowners, but not crossing the line into becoming antagonistic and being somebody that you can't really work with. So the idea is to be annoying enough so that they want to bring you inside the tent, peeing out, rather than being on the outside of the tent doing the other. And there is a bit of an art form to that, and it's going to be different with every single situation you're in. So I suppose, moving on to where we're at with Leeds Community Homes now, creating people-powered homes. We started that with the intention of making things like Lilac, Chaco, self-builds, all sorts of little community projects easier and quicker to do. And we came to the conclusion that all of these community organisations, these small starting organisations, they have to do everything from the bottom up. You have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, and that's with including reputation, it's including all your skills, and particularly the one problem that we have within the sector is we're not capitalised, and what do I mean by that? I mean, we're all starting from the point of view where we don't have money to start with. We don't have assets we can work from. We don't necessarily have access to borrowing or even grants right at the start. We need to have done loads and loads and loads of stuff to get to the point before anybody will give us grants or will lend us money. So our idea with Leeds Community Homes was to create an organisation that would build on the successes of previous projects, so that we weren't always having to create that from the start, from the ground up. So our idea was so we could take the reputation and the can-do stuff from doing things like Lilac and Chaco, build that core of expertise and deliverability, so that we had a reputation to be able to do things. But then also, really importantly, to build an asset base so that we could be we could play the game at the same level as some of the other and be dealt with as more of an equal by some of the larger stakeholders, the landholders, the developers, the council. So our plan has always been to build our own homes. But in order to do that, one of the things we've needed, we've built our business plans, we've brought in grants, we've brought in ethical lending from the likes of Ecology Building Society. But one of the things we've always needed right from the start, just to give us that edge, and it's the community that have given us this, is basically investment from the community. And I mean physical financial investment. So we did a community share offer in 2017, and community shares are basically things that organisations can raise money directly from individual people and entities. And we raised 360,000 from that, and we're just about to start our second one. We're aiming to raise £500,000 to create our next scheme in Leeds, which will be 34 affordable homes. And the beauty of that is it gives us a bag of capital to put on the table when we sit down and start talking to all the stakeholders. And it's capital that people and the community have given us to be able to do that. And so I think there's an awful lot of things we can learn from that process. I don't know how much that's going to be applicable to York Central and YoCo, but there's certain lessons around building that, building that reputation, that deliverability, that legitimacy as a community organisation, credibility that you've got a plan that can be delivered, and find a way of getting capital into the project and into supporting it.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Jimm. I think the line about being irritating enough but not too far is one I'll have on my headstone in due course, so it's worth memory. I'm interested just from the point of that line about how you need to kind of build scale and credibility. That sounds like a key aspect of what you've been doing over the last few years.
Yeah, very much so. As I say, it's building on the reputation of what you've done, but also the fact that once you've got assets, once you've got people, a body of people who've got experience, you're building. They're the foundations you're building on.
Yeah, excellent. Anyone in the audience have any questions specifically on Jimm's talk? Right, we'll move on then to the next, because further down Greg's list of vital ingredients was both community and local jobs. And so, Josh, I'd like to hear about the story from Homebaked.
Yeah, hello, can you all hear me all right? I'll just shout a bit louder. Is it on?
You can hear.
Oh, okay. That's the main thing. If people can hear, that's the main thing. But thank you. So I'm going to read from a piece of paper because this is my first time speaking on behalf of Homebaked. So I just need to make sure everything is correct. So thank you for inviting me as well, and thank you for being here. I'm Josh. First and foremost, I'm a tenant of Homebaked Community Land Trust. Before moving to live above the former Mitchell's Bakery, I didn't really know much about Anfield, where Homebaked CLT is based, community housing, regeneration, or anything related to that issue. Living there just over a year now, learning their history and imagining their future alongside their neighbourhoods has made me feel like I genuinely belong to a place. In 2002, the neighbourhood's Homebaked CLT now resides was classified as a market failure and designated a housing market renewal area. The government-backed programme aimed to demolish 1,800 properties and construct 1,300 new homes. When the programme discontinued in 2010, the neighbourhood was left in a state of uncertainty, with boarded-up streets and unfinished houses. The disappointment, along with a broader economic recession and budget cuts, created a lasting sense of frustration. The former Mitchell's Bakeries, an iconic landmark, was part of this neighbourhood. However, due to the decline of the high street and the impact of the HMRI programme, the bakery closed its doors in January 2011. There's nowhere left in the neighbourhood to buy bread. Homebaked grew from the Two Up, Two Down project supported by the Liverpool Biennial and facilitated by artist Jan van Hesselwyk. The project aimed to empower the community in shaping their neighbourhood and future through art and design methodologies. The project rented the Mitchell's family bakery, which became a site for public discussion and planning sessions. In 2012, a community land trust was formed to develop the bakery building and further community assets. Homebaked Bakery Cooperative was created from this to rebuild the bakery as a successful business, and in 2023, the bakery finally reopened. The community had worked together to bring back bread to the neighbourhood. The CLT has been running events and courses to activate the surrounding spaces ever since. Other businesses with community engagement at their core grew around the area, as the eco-friendly cooperative ran Kitty's Laundrette and the female-led brewing collective Homegrown Collective. The Oakfield Terrace is Homebaked CLT's main focus. We are transforming the terrace adjacent to the bakery building into an innovative and highly energy-efficient mixed-use high street scheme owned by the community. Homebaked CLT plans to regenerate these unoccupied Edwardian terraces located next to the bakery, after having finalised the first phase of the bakery building refurbishment in 2015. From this, we started a co-creating scheme for Oakfield Terrace, a process which we named Build Your Own High Street. Homebaked CLT used participatory planning with a diverse group of around 20 community group members who worked closely with architects and experts in workshops. They shared information on budgets and external factors, allowing negotiation and prioritisation. The core design group made key decisions, seeking feedback from the board and the wider public through consultations. The CLT conducted 16 planning workshops and engaged around 900 people through public events, drop-ins and surveys. These 9 terraces will be transformed into 8 homes, including traditional 3-bed, differently sized 2-bedroom, including traditional 3 bedrooms, differently sized 2 bedrooms, and a 1-bedroom apartment. The terraces will be retrofitted to high environmental standards, ensuring low energy bills for future occupants. One of the flats will be fully accessible and have a space for a living carer. All homes will be available at affordable rent. All of these ideas of a better living created by a community, designed by neighbours for their future neighbours. The Oakfield Terrace scheme aims to catalyse the regeneration of Oakfield Road, with a vision for more community-owned spaces for living, working and socialising in that area. We recently received approval from the council to begin on the site and hope to begin on the ground soon. Alongside these, we run artisan residency schemes, workshops in how to live warm and comfortably over the winter, and seasonal community markets. Soon we'll be opening a community shares programme to help us purchase the entire terrace and finish the project that was started many years ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Excellent stuff. Just picking up on Jim's comment about how irritating do you need to be. I mean, I'm guessing that your relationship with the council wasn't particularly sunny in the early days of this.
No.
And how has that changed over as you've started to demonstrate your ability to do stuff?
Well, it kind of it's a difficult one for us, because as soon as we feel like our foot is in the door with the council, something changes in Liverpool Council. So there's always been like quite a lot of reshuffling and restructuring with the Liverpool City Council. So we kind of having to keep to reintroducing ourselves to them and all the other sort of stakeholders that they have. And I think because we're one of the bigger projects in Liverpool, that is all about like community assets and us building up community assets as well. It's one of those things that we could be a big pilot for the Liverpool City Council to kind of be like, look what we can do and look what we can help with the area. So it's that thing of like, we obviously have to kind of keep knocking to remind them who we are, but sort of making sure we work together in a way that is like mutually beneficial. So we're not like, we're knocking on the door quite a lot. And obviously, continual knocks can be quite annoying. But it's about, again, just sort of building that mutual relationship with them.
That's great. And Jim talked about the use of community share issues as a way of kind of bringing money into the scheme. How have you raised capital for the stuff that you're doing there?
So it's one of those things where, like, again, I'm quite new to the project, so there's certain things which, like, I'm not too sure. I think we do a lot of sort of like big fundraising bids, so it'll be a mixture of things like, depending on the project. So as I mentioned, we do artisan residency schemes, sort of continue the history that was built from the Liverpool Biennial. So we'll apply for like Arts Council funding for that, and then other sort of big ones from like there's ones like the Big Green Week that happens that sort of helped kickstart this scheme we're doing at the moment called the Cozy Homes Club, which is all about helping people to we give workshops in how to keep your house warm over the winter. So it's always sort of like different sort of pockets of funding. And then as we sort of like make this jump into, buying the terrace and starting off that project, I think that's when, you know, that's when the community shares like offer will come in, and like different levels of it as well, where you can buy that share and have that sort of investment, or you can have this sort of like a donation, keep that sort of, you can sort of like give us your money and then like take a step back and watch it all unfold. So yeah, it's one of those things which like it's a lot of different pots that we're sort of applying to and taking from.
Great stuff, thank you. Any questions specifically for Josh which you would forget if we left them until after Sarah's session? Right, Sarah, let's pick up on the last thing that Greg talked about, which is about how money needs to talk to community and kind of your role in that process, really.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So, hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Hart. I am the Community-Led Housing Enabler Hub Manager for North Yorkshire and East Riding. Bit of a mouthful. Very similar to what I do is what actually Jimm does at Leeds Community Homes. So we cover the whole of North Yorkshire and East Riding, but we're slightly different in the sense that we are incubated by Community First Yorkshire. So our role is very much about supporting communities in rural communities and touch base in York as well. So going on the point around finance, so currently I'm looking at economic models where we could look at potentially looking at equity that people have that can bring to a development. Some of our schemes, we actually have 24 schemes across North Yorkshire and East Riding. Some of those schemes though are, they do pull down what I consider blended finance. So it's some private finance, some community share offers will be happening, but actually also equity from the people that want to live in the homes, and also some market homes that will cross-subsidise to enable homes to be affordable and truly affordable. So I would say structure in terms of the governance as well is really key to make these homes truly affordable in perpetuity. But I look in terms of finance. We work in a sector where there aren't many lenders in community-led housing. And one thing that we're trying to really sort of bed down on nationally, we have national organisations. We are part of an ecosystem. So the national organisations are the National Community Land Trust Network, the Co-Housing Network, and the Confederation of Cooperative Housing. And we are working to speak to lenders, to speak to pension funds, to see how we can create more social impact with some of the money that they hold, and hopefully that will enable more homes to be built. Yeah, so that's basically what we do. Just to give you a flavour though, so in North Yorkshire, in a broader view of the region, we have those 24 schemes, and they range from anything from a chapel that is being converted in the Yorkshire Dales National Park. That will be 2 rental homes for local people that are truly affordable in perpetuity. There are a CLT, a community land trust. And the key there is community. The community have a massive amount of involvement. They recognise the needs of their community, and they want to basically make sure that they are making sure that their communities remain sustainable, which is why they are really a powerful bunch of people. And I always say, people say it's ordinary people do community-led housing. I don't say they're ordinary. I think they're extraordinary. And they recognise the need, and they just get on with it. It's slightly different in Yorkshire. Some parts of the country, they like to work with partners, housing associations who can pull down government grants. What I do find in my rural communities, and I don't know if it's a Yorkshire thing, I don't know if Jimm can tell me something different, but they like to do things themselves. They're really resilient. And we support groups throughout the whole stages, from forming the groups, to getting planning, to find those little pockets of funding though, to even get you up to planning. It's an environment that can be tricky. I'm not going to lie, it does need to come with a health warning sometimes, I think. Groups are just very resilient and very tenacious. Now, I know Phil's question is about finances and how it can work, and how it can work somewhere like in York Central. So you look at Coin Street on the South Bank in London. Coin Street, I think it's about 40 years old now.
40 years old this year.
And that was a scheme where the community said, right, look, we're pragmatic as well. We need affordable homes, but we also need to show how credible we are and look at different assets and how we can keep the money within our local economy. So the whole idea about circular economy. So they have you know, a very lovely restaurant on the top floor in the Oxley Tower. They pay full rate on the lease, but that enables other stuff to happen within the scheme. So it enables the affordable home. So this idea of cross subsidy is something that government are even really looking at now with regards in the planning laws, you know, to enable communities to try and look at cross subsidy. So we have to recognise that you can't build 100% affordable homes because you need a vibrant community. Those people with equity have something to bring to the party as well. They have to be part of a community. So I think it's enabling. We live in an environment where grants are getting less and less availability. So we have to look at the economics, and we have to listen to the landowners, and we have to listen to key stakeholders and hear what they want, and sit around the table and how can we work out an economic model that works for everybody, not just the landowners, but the community. The community in everything, in what I do, is absolutely key. What I do find is when you bring the community on board, you turn those NIMBYs into YIMBYs, as I like to say. And that is really key. But the economic model really needs to be looked at in this country. We have our friends over in Europe who do huge amounts of cooperative housing. It's secure rent. We live in a society where it seems the private rental sector is the default now to go because social housing isn't available because it's been sold off through to the right to buy schemes. And we need to look at new different models where we can all talk, though, the same language. I think it's key to sit down around a table with all stakeholders where we all learn from each other but actually speak the same language. And I think Jimm touched on Chaco, Chapeltown co-housing. I went there, they've now just moved in. It's a brilliant scheme. And I think one of the questions about our event today is about lessons learned. I think we all need to go to Chaco and listen to the story, because what they've done there is they've kept people within their communities, enabled that community to stay together, to stay within their support networks. But actually, some people living there have brought their equity with them. That has enabled young people to live there. That's enabled some students to live there. It's a really vibrant community. And I really do, if you are local to Yorkshire, please go and visit Chapeltown. I really would like you to go and see, smell it, breathe it, touch it, because it's a reality. And that reality, I think, can be supersized on York Central. And I really can't see why not. We just need to get everybody around the table and have that frank conversation, really, because we have to recognise we are in a housing crisis, but we have to listen to communities as well. It can't be that top-down approach. We have to all be around the table. Thanks, Phil.
And you kind of paint a picture there of this kind of incredibly wide range of skills and ability that community groups need to have, which stretches through from understanding national funding availability, talking to the limited pool of national funders, innovating all the time in order to be able to create new economic models which work, while at the same time doing the stuff that Josh and his friends are doing in terms of kind of connecting to the local community through stuff like the cozy home stuff that you're doing there, and at the same time doing what Jimm's doing, which is persuading people to put their hands in their pockets and invest locally. So it's kind of big ask there, isn't it? But it's something which groups, as you say, with Chaco, are doing. I'd like to open up now to the floor to questions. So do we have any questions for our speakers? Yes, Jen, over there. Have we got a roving mic? Yeah, it's on its way to you.
I don't live in Yorkshire or York, but I'm intrigued by a word that Greg used right at the beginning about sustainability, about it being given. And you as well, Sarah, mentioned sustainability. I'm wondering, given that we're talking about shaping futures, how much sustainability, and you talked about net zero, Greg, about how much this is really driving what needs to be done, because there are some formidable challenges ahead of what has got to be achieved in 7 years, not by 2050, but by 2030, and how much that is underpinning, because actually affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean sustainable housing, and it's a very difficult bit of arithmetic to do. when there's a real demand and expectation on sustainability, biodiversity, and so on. And I'm just wondering how this tension is beginning to play itself out.
Can I ask Greg, could you just say what you know about where York Central stands on that, and then Jimm maybe to say a bit about how you've been doing that in Leeds, because I know that's very high on your agenda there.
I've always assumed that because it's a brownfield site, but it's a virgin site, that sustainability will be given. That actually there will be a requirement of anything there to make sure it's sustainable. And of course, if you've seen the figures about offices in this country, I mean, there's some incredibly high percentage of offices that will not be sustainable, and that companies will have to move out and move to new offices for that reason. But the housing, I've assumed, is going to be sustainable. Now, if I'm wrong, then we're all in trouble, in all honesty. Because if actually you can't take a brand new development, the size of York Central, it's the size of the King's Cross development. It's a massive development. I think sustainability is just a requirement from the beginning.
Yeah, I take that. I think there's a question about what kind of sustainability you mean. I mean, there's, on the one hand, we've got the obvious environmental, low energy, and absolutely, many people in our sector are very, very inspired by this. We're ahead of the curve to a great degree. And we have aspirations to do the best we possibly can. But obviously, we, like everybody else who is developing anything, we live in a world where there is the art of the possible. And sometimes we can't always do all the things that we want to do. So developers have that issue, councils have that issue, housing associations have that issue. We all live in the same financial situation, so we can't always achieve all the levels we want to do, but we have to aim as high as we possibly can. One thing I would say is within the sector, in my experience, where you've got communities trying to create housing, that priority, conflicting priorities, that priority around energy efficiency and low carbon is really up there. The people who are creating their own homes, this is a really massive thing. But the other thing I'd like to say is about sustainability. It's also about how long-term this housing actually is. Like you said, affordable housing doesn't mean housing forever. And I think the one great thing about having communities involved with stuff, we are dealing with the end users. We aren't just building the stuff and letting a management company in to do it, or selling off to private renters. We are basically the builders are the people who are going to live there. So they have an inherent interest in that being basically a long-term in perpetuity use.
Can I just add a comment there, actually, Phil? Because I work in rural communities, like Jimm alludes to, it's really high on the agenda is about even net zero. So globally in North Yorkshire, we have what's called the carbon abatement strategy, and we are looking to strive towards net zero carbon in North Yorkshire by 2035. And that is a real sort of want and ask of local authority. But I would say locally, sort of micro level, our communities we are working with, they are building truly affordable homes, but they want to make them affordable, well, in terms of fuel poverty. So it's very much they are the end user, and they are thinking about that, and they are thinking about the environment. So they're approaching lots of things at a fabric first approach as well. Sometimes tricky in the national parks, but we have to work with our stakeholders to see how we can do things. So we're also looking at retrofitting grade 2 listed buildings and using innovative ideas and looking at modular housing as well. MMCs coming into play in some of my schemes in the national park, and they are really airtight. The emissions are literally Phil there is a passive house designer, they are extremely really low energy properties. So I just wanted to pick up on that on a rural context and thinking about fuel poverty in a rural context.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on it a little bit. As Sarah mentioned, I'm an architect, and one of YoCo's aspirations is that, in addition to we could do passive housing all over York Central with the community and make it affordable to live in, and that would be brilliant. But if everyone then has to come straight out of their home, jump in their car, and then drive to where they work and to their shops, we're slightly kind of missing the point. So the thinking behind trying to turn York Central into a 15-minute mixed-use neighbourhood, to try and build local jobs, places where people can live their lives locally, rather than simply somewhere which is housing stacked upon more housing, seems to be a really kind of crucial point. The issue with that is the complexity involved in it. Sarah's talked about the need to build an economic model that does it, and Josh's scheme over in Homebaked, has kind of shifted from this focus of one particular aspect of it, saving the shop, to dealing with housing, jobs, workshop, arts and culture, and all manner of other stuff. So it is difficult to do, but I think it's something that, this is what YoCo's been set up to try and do, is to try and bring those together, work through the discussions and conversations that need to happen to make it doable. So can we have the microphone at the front, please? Thank you.
Thank you. The missing bit of sustainability is accessibility and a commitment to lifetime homes and wheelchair accessible housing standards.
Yeah.
91% of housing in this country is inaccessible. And of course, the demographics are such that we have an ageing population and the incidence of impairment rises with age. In this city, the only commitment seems to be to extra care facilities for, the over 50s. So, there's the ghetto you go to when you reach a certain age. I know a wheelchair using student who's just completed her degree. She very much wants to stay in this city, but there is nowhere accessible for her to live. So in terms of, everything you said about, the economy and skills and, it is absolutely vital, and it does of course cause problems for the current economic model because it requires greater space standards, and developers want to build them thick and fast and small. So hopefully, as we now have a new administration, they will be more open to these issues. But while we wait for the government to, drag its feet on making the amendments to Part M, a requirement, and we have a percentage of new developments being required to be lifetime homes, then, I don't see anything changing terribly much. I wonder if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Jimm, would you like to pick up on that with the stuff you're doing in Leeds?
Yeah, totally. And that's a brilliant point. The stuff we're doing new build wise, it is accessible, and so all properties are to a certain level accessible, and a proportion of them are even more flexible and more specifically able to be used by people with accessibility issues. But I think, we've got the drivers that make us want to do that because we're a member-led organisation, so our members are our residents and they tell us that they need that kind of thing, so we're talking to them all the time about it. I think the challenge we face is not so much with new build, although there are still challenges with that, but I think the massive issue, like sustainability, is with the massive amount of housing stock that exists at the moment that is just not suitable for people in every situation. And we've got to face the fact that we are going to have to invest massively in this country in both energy efficiency and accessibility to make our housing stock usable by everybody over the next few years. And I don't think that's something that's our chancellors have really got in their budgets yet.
Entirely possible. Any other comments back on that, Sarah? Yeah.
So I'm supporting a group in Hudswell Village. It's on the edge of Richmond and on the edge of National Park. And the whole scheme is a lifetime home scheme. The community have recognised it's their third scheme they've done. The second scheme was bungalows, but the third scheme, they said, no, we need a scheme where the scheme will be flexible to enable carers to come in maybe one day, but actually every single home is a lifetime home and it's all accessible because they've speaking to people that have those accessibility issues. So they've been involved in the conversation, and it was something that the village said, right, this is what we're going to do. A commitment, basically.
I think also you've been on one of the kind of study visits we did of the city centre, looking at how the city centre works at the moment and what the issues are around that. One of the things that YoCo's always tried to do is to kick debate off about stuff and try and make sure that we don't simply kind of make assumptions, but that we engage with the people in the city and engage with people who might be involved with York Central to try and make sure that discussion happens and that negotiation takes place, because sometimes there are conflicting priorities. So I guess I would say that I hope that process can continue. as York Central moves forward and with the developers who are involved, to make sure that we're not just working to national standards, but we're talking about how this place works as a community with the people who will be using it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Lifetime Homes and Part M before we moved away from that. I come from that sort of background as an occupational therapist, just to challenge developers, architects, that Part M and Lifetime Homes are minimum standards. They will not future-proof communities, partly because they're based on really, really, really old size wheelchairs. Lifetime Homes, actually, the standard is about being able to visit someone with a disability. Great for prams and families, and that gets rid of the threshold at the front door, but it's all on the ground floor. So Lifetime Homes aren't built for someone using a wheelchair. But I think our challenge for our older population is that we all need accessible housing. I've just remodelled my house with 2 new bathrooms, made sure the toilets are like 90, nearly 6 foot tall. I'm thinking, how can I get off on a toilet in the future? So it's smaller things that we can future-proof when we're remodelling house association properties, social housing, but be cautious about just applying Lifetime Homes or even Part M, because they are minimum standards. Anyone with a slightly wider wheelchair will not be able to get through those doors. We need to challenge government. We need to challenge them on those standards and go for best practice, not minimum standards. Otherwise, you're not future-proofing and it won't be sustainable.
That's great. Thank you. We've all heard that up here. That's great. So can we go to the gent at the back on the other side there?
Yeah, Tom Hustler from Homes England. We're obviously doing the development work there. Just to say that all of our developments meet Lifetime Home standards. I mean, you made comments about the standard, but whatever the standard is, we make sure that every house on it meets the standard. And also, because the first element we're building at York Central is the public square, we've employed accessibility consultants to make sure that it's no good a bunch of like sitting around a table talking about it. There's a consultant's been appointed to make sure that the square is accessible and usable and relevant to all people in York. So yeah, we do make sure, the future home standards we also adhere to. So as a government agency, what we do with the developers is we don't just sell the land and walk away. We give them a building lease and they only get the freehold when they've completed the homes. And we employ monitoring surveyors throughout the process. And if they decide to cut a corner or not do something, it's picked up and it's reworked. So yeah, we have this very large stick we never have to use, which is you don't get the freehold on day one, you get the freehold on the final day, and we can therefore make sure that you build what the planning consent said you would build and to the standards we require of you as us as a landowner.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom.
It was really interesting to hear what the panelists had to say about innovation. And I just wonder, with York Central having a long build-out timescale, whether York Central needs to be able to build in a mechanism for innovation that as people move into the area and as communities are developed, that allows change to take place throughout that build-out process, rather than setting it out now and thinking in 30 years' time that's going to be right. I think listening to that, innovation to me seems really important as we talk about community participation.
I pointed the microphone round to Greg.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think that's essential. I agree with you. I mean, even now you're looking at a planning permission that was granted, 3-4 years ago. I think everyone accepts it's going to have to change. And I think that is ongoing. I mean, it's a 20-30 year project to finish York Central. So the idea that you can, I mean, it's what I always said about people who want to do 20-year strategy plans. The only thing you know about a 20-year strategy plan is that it's wrong, because the world changes as you go along. And I think it's the same with developments.
Yeah. Anyone else want to pick up on that? Oh yeah, got one at the back there.
Yeah, hi, David Stevenson, Homes England. Just to say that does effectively happen. There is an outline consent go to 2019, that's correct, but there is reserve matters that come forward at each stage, so there is an opportunity to build on the detail and for people to comment, council to approve details as we move through the scheme and move through reserve matters. So that process does exist through the planning system.
Thank you. Just to make use of the last few minutes we've got, I would like to, given that we are in a situation with York Central, so York Central Homes England are very much taking a lead in terms of the client for York Central. We know that a key element of the scheme being built out will be the appointment of master developer that Greg's already mentioned here. Who knows, the potential master developers might even be in the room we're in now. So what I'd like to do is just kind of ask our panellists to kind of come up with one thing you would like the final chosen developers to do to make the process of community engagement in the future of the site work better. Sarah, you're in the hot seat down the end. Do you want to crack at the first one of those?
I think with regards to community engagement, I think what I feel we should really think about, I've learned recently about Bologna and about living labs, and I feel that what we should be doing is maybe having pop-up living labs around the city and really asking everybody within the community their thoughts on York Central, and then even those hard to reach communities as well, and different demographics. So we really need to be reaching out to all. And I like the idea of a living lab where we can just pop up for a couple of months or 3 months or whatever it is, because it's going to be a long process, York Central. And I really feel that we can do that.
Josh, from your side, we had a lengthy natter last night about the history of Homebaked and how you got where you got. Was there any kind of point along the way of that where you felt that was a big step that made the whole process easier?
I think for us, and I think in Anfield in general, I feel like there can be a lot of assumption when it comes to community engagement that people will naturally come to you just because you have like the nice banner and like you put all the money into like trying to invite people in. And I think that doesn't necessarily work. You may be wanting to ask big questions and wanting to listen to a lot of people, and by going like, come to us, we'll sort of like have those conversations. Those things don't work. Like, I think one of the best things that we do at the moment as Homebaked is like, because we all are like people, a lot of people who work for Homebaked also live in that area as well. Like, we're just frequently around there. So the person who will be like, who like will go for like pub for a drink or something like that, and that's our sort of community engagement as well. Like, having a chat with people over a pint just about what they're doing first, and then just sort of meeting them at their sort of we should be equally as interested in their lives in the way that they should be equally interested in what we want to do with the area. And I feel like meeting people on their terms rather than setting the terms and boundaries ourselves is the way of how to do it. So I think that's something which I know for me, it's like, the example being like with the bakery when we were using it as a hub for these initial conversations, and people kept coming in and asking, can I buy a loaf of bread? And it's like, well, we haven't done bread in years because it's been shut down. And people were like sort of going to the place they would regularly attend to use as a bakery for us to be there. And I think that's when that drive to sort of be like, oh, actually, yeah, we should be bringing back this bakery as our main focus sort of came ahead. Because, again, it wasn't about us sort of going, we're thinking about this, come here and we'll sort of take your ideas. People were going to there on their terms, and that dictated kind of what we did. And I think that's where the beauty sort of comes for it. It's, I think that's what I'm trying to say.
That's nicely put. Thanks, Josh. Jimm?
From the point of view of what you'd want a developer to do, I think rather than fear the community as a stakeholder, embrace them, because the opportunity there is to do something really remarkable. Whereas if you fear, then it just breeds an antagonistic relationship, and anything good is going to come in spite of that rather than because of it.
Great stuff. Thank you. And Greg?
The first challenge is to make it that this is being York Central is being done by and for the people of York, as opposed to being done to the people of York, and therefore that there's a big exercise to be done. Exactly as you said, don't fear people. Don't work from the basis of thinking this is all agitprop people who are just trying to come in and don't understand your financial constraints and the rest of us. Explain them. And it seems to me that's there's a big job to be done on York Central, which is about, first of all, selling the idea to the people of York, and then involving them in what bits can be done and what. If not, you end up. I mean, we've not talked about transport at all. I mean, there's a big transport agenda still to be put in. With a new council, I mean, the last council almost refused to do it. I mean, the new council is going to have a transport policy for York, which will have an impact on York Central.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, we've got a couple of minutes in hand, so I'd like to just thank our panellists who've been here today. I'd like to thank all of you for turning up and for asking questions and being part of this. YoCo has a gazebo over yonder where we're doing all sorts of stuff that invites you to imagine future places and the networks that you create within them. Do come and see us. Enjoy the rest of the day, and hope you take away some useful stuff from it. Thanks very much.